Hi, I'm Diane Hill and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at the differences between silk paper and watercolor paper. If you haven't heard of silk paper before, this is a silk fabric that's literally, imagine a silk scarf. It's been treated and it's been backed with a layer of non-woven paper, and it makes it the perfect surface for painting on. So if you imagine a piece of silk fabric that's floaty and loose, if you were to paint on it, it would just bleed. So this is a way of turning a fabric into a paper, and it's absolutely beautiful. I have been painting on silk for the last over 10 years now, and I've never looked back. It's really given my paintings a really luxurious edge to it. But the thing is that it is quite an investment, and I do have it available on my website, but I understand that it is quite pricey, and lots of you have let me know that you are terrified to paint on it, and I completely understand. You've spent a lot of money on the silk paper, you want to get it right. You get 4 sheets in a pack and people do not want to waste one of them. I do include little strips so that you can sort of test out before you move on to a larger piece, and I do kind of advise that you cut them in half or in quarters and do smaller paintings before you move on to the other sheets. But I totally understand, and so this is why I'm comparing watercolor paper. I'm actually comparing this one by Arches. It's the hot pressed, and I chose this one because it's smoother. I've gone for the smooth one because it's probably going to be the closest to silk paper. And we're going to have a look at the differences in the way you can blend, the way you can paint details and washes. This video isn't necessarily going to be like a tutorial of how to paint or anything, it's literally just looking at the differences, but the techniques that I use to paint chinoiserie art, they can all be found in my ebook, which is available. I'll put the link in the description below, and yeah, you can download my ebook and get all of my basic techniques, my colours, how I mix, how I do the details, everything. And I'm also working on an online course, so make sure that you sign up to my emails because I'm going to be sending you lots of cool information on how to paint chinoiserie art, and I'm going to be uploading more YouTube videos for free so that you can just delve into my little world and we can learn together. So shall we get into this video and we'll have a look at the differences between silk paper and watercolor paper. So we're going to look at the differences between the Arches Aquarelle Hot Pressed 300 GSM 140 pound 100% cotton paper. This is the one that I was recommended because it's the smoothest kind of watercolor paper, and I feel like for chinoiserie painting I would want a kind of smooth background to kind of emulate that silk finish, because silk is super smooth. This is my silk paper, and I will take a piece of this to compare. So I've just taken a piece of paper from... So on top here we have the watercolor paper, and here we have the silk paper. This isn't the actual size that you'll get. I've cut this down. It's a bit bigger, the sizes of my sheets. So the first thing, the obvious thing, is the sheen in the silk. It's literally like a sheet of silk fabric, you know, like you get a silk scarf, floppy fabric, and it has been treated for painting and backed with a non-woven paper. So it's just a plain white paper on the back, and on the front is the silk, and just want to get some of that sheen for you to see up close. So the silk is woven, so it's got a really subtle, gorgeous texture to it. And because it's a fabric, it's almost like when you paint on it, the paint dyes the fabric. So it very much sinks in, and it's really, really easy to build layer upon layer. So what's easy is to dye the entire sheet of silk with a really light wash of acrylic. And then you can keep going over, you could keep rubbing in textures, brushing on textures, and this will never come away. Whereas with a paper, what will happen is eventually if you were to keep going over it, the pieces of paper on the top, on the surface, will start to kind of rub away. So this is the watercolor paper. It's thicker. They are color-wise almost exactly the same. So The watercolor paper is a kind of matte finish. So here we have the watercolor paper, silk paper. I'm just going to put a little W here and an S here so that you know. So I'm going to use my porcelain paint palette. I love using this palette. It's really great for watercolor and gouache paint. You just leave your paints in there. It's got a little lid so that you can protect it from any dust. And I just love working with these water-based paints because you can just come in and reactivate it days later. And I'm using one of my paint brushes. These are the Chinoiserie paint brushes, which are Chinese brushes that I have specially selected for painting chinoiserie art. It took me years to find these brushes, but they are absolutely incredible and I'm so thankful that I found them. So I'm going to start by painting just some basic washes. This is the watercolor paper. So the first thing that I can notice that's different is that there's a bit more texture with this one. I'll do the same thing on the silk. And the difference is that it kind of just dyes the paper, and it kind of just you can just lift any bubbles up by, there you go. Same here, just lift a bubble. So there is a bit more of a kind of painterly texture with the watercolor paper, and this is like, it kind of sinks into the fabric. Now I will just paint like a chinoiserie leaf, which is one of my favourite things to do. So do the same on the silk. So I feel like the silk glides on a bit easier. I'll do it again. I'll do a flower. And the same on the silk paper. It's just a little, for me, it's a bit easier to paint on the silk. So the paint's not dry yet, but I can first of all notice that there is some patchiness here. And I think that's down to the beauty of watercolor painting, and the reason people choose these papers is because they really want to see this kind of, you know, painterly brush strokes, and that's a great aesthetic. And for the kind of work that I do, I love that kind of smooth look, and I think that's what chinoiserie is quite known for, is that kind of like luxurious, smooth finish. So let's do a bit of blending. So I'm just going to put a darker colour of green here. I'm going to get my second brush out. And I'm going to load my second brush with water. All of the techniques that I use you can find in my ebook, and I'll link it below. And there are some other videos on YouTube as well where I go into a bit more detail. But for now, this is just kind of comparing these two papers. So to do blending, you do need to make sure that it's completely dry. So I'm just going to put down a layer of just water just to help me blend, and starting with the dark paint. So there is a really nice transition here, and that is exactly what I would like to see, is ease of being able to blend the paint. And apparently that's what this That's what this brand of watercolor paper Arches is really well known for. And so the same on silk. Just a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to change to my detail brush and add in some finer details. Just need to make sure that everything is dry. Okay, so that wasn't actually fully dry. And that is a mistake, so I'm just going to dry it because you can see that it's bled a little bit there. Just finish that off. So that's crisper now that it's fully bone dry, and I do get caught out sometimes by trying to rush things. I should know better. It's really uncomfortable painting in the opposite direction. Okay. And let's add So this is what I love about this detail brush, is that it's got a really long body and you can just keep painting with it without having to reload as often. Let's just do some just little squiggles for no reason whatsoever. Okay, so I think that that is enough of a comparison. So for me, the watercolor paper is ideal for practicing and getting your techniques right. The issue for me is this kind of patching that happens. This transition on the leaf is really nice, but ultimately it's just not quite as smooth and perfect as the silk, and I really like the texture. So I only paint on silk paper, but as I said, I really think that this is going to be the best bet for you to practice your skills, because ultimately the result is not too different, and I could quite happily create a beautiful piece of chinoiserie art on here. I just have to be a bit more careful about the layering of paint. To have to be maybe a bit quicker. I also want to have a look at the dyeing the background and then working on top of that, so we'll do that next. So the way I dye my backgrounds is I get some acrylic paint or acrylic gouache, something that just won't move when it's reactivated with water, so that you can paint on top of it easily. And I water it down heavily, give it a really light wash, and then I work on top of it. So let's have a look at how this performs. So the tiniest amount for this, just adding a load of water. Just gonna give it a little mix up. I always just test my colours, so that's good. So I like to dye my silks in really light colours, and they always come out a bit darker than you think, so just a note. So I use a wide brush. Usually I use something much wider than this, but just for this video, I'm just going to show you. So just brushing it on really lightly. So just gonna wait for that to dry, or what I would normally do is just get out my hairdryer. So that is now completely dry and both of them look great. I love them both. This is showing how they've both buckled a bit, so it's kind of equal. With the silk, I always give it an iron once I've finished because ultimately it's a fabric, so that's the great thing about it. So I'll do another layer just to see how it performs. Let's go on again. So as you're brushing them on, I noticed that the silk doesn't have the kind of, like I can see the paper is starting to kind of pick up a little bit, but I'd be interested to see how it looks when it's dry. So the difference at the moment is, I can see it quite clearly. Let's give it a dry. So this is the final result of the washes. I feel like they've both applied really beautifully. I can see the only difference is that this is a bit more uniform, and this one I can still see the kind of paper texture, but that is not a bad thing. So I'm going to do some shading first. So I'll just paint a little. And just blend it out. I'll do the same. I think the main difference is in when you're painting on the paper, it kind of like brings up a lot of texture, but when it dries, it kind of softens that out. Then here I'm going to really saturate and keep going over it. So I just want to see which one is kind of picking up the colour underneath. And so let's give this a dry. So here's the final results of the washes. I feel like both are beautiful. Again, this one is more textured, so I can see here there's a bit more kind of texturing and paint, kind of pooling, I guess, or not so much pooling, but yeah, slightly here. And this one is smoother. This is a smoother transition than here. What's interesting is when I use just water on both of the backgrounds, the one on the silk didn't lift up much of the underneath colour, and the one on the watercolour has lifted up some of the underneath colour, and it's kind of spread it around here. So I think the main difference is that the paint sinks into the paper with the silk paper more. And so for me, when I'm doing backgrounds, I could be doing backgrounds of many layers of lots of different washes. With the silk, you can go on and on and on and on. You can like really saturate it with water and it will never kind of disintegrate like paper will. So that's one of the key benefits for me when doing my washes and backgrounds, which I love. So this is a personal preference thing, and I just wanted to show you the results, and it'd be interesting to see what you think. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it's given you a lot to think about, and I hope that you can now make an informed decision on whether you use silk paper or watercolor paper. I think that the watercolor paper is going to be a great place to start if you are a complete beginner. You can then start to learn your techniques, get your blending all locked down, and then you can, if you choose to, move up to the silk paper with a bit more confidence. If you are more of an intermediate painter or advanced, then you could just try the silk paper. I'm sure you're going to love it, but ultimately the decision is yours, and you're going to get beautiful results out of both of them, I am sure. Just the one thing to think about is your brushes, and I think that actually your brushes are going to be more important than the surface that you're painting on. I think it's super important to use a highly absorbent brush with a wide body and a fine tip. Natural hair is best, but you can do this with synthetics as well, and you just want that body to retain the paint, and you want to be able to kind of push down and lift with fluid actions, and the brushes that I have sourced are absolutely perfect for this, so check them out too. I love to hear from you, I love to give feedback, I love to interact with you, and it really helps me, especially as I am currently building an online course. I want to hear from you, and I want to hear where your struggles are, your pain points, and we can work together to create an amazing community of chinoiserie artists. And we should keep the tradition alive. It's definitely a mysterious thing, and I think that it's so beautiful, and so many more of us want to learn this. So subscribe, like, comment, do all those things to help me grow and to help me spread the word of chinoiserie. And also follow me on Instagram, Diane Hill Design. This is where I am highly active. I'm on TikTok, Diane Hill Design, Pinterest, YouTube Shorts, obviously, Facebook. There's so many. I would really appreciate it, because I'm very much at the beginning of this YouTube journey, and I really want to grow this channel and share more with you. I've just invested in some lovely camera equipment, and I want to take this more seriously. I want to share my work with you, and so if you could help me get there, that'd be amazing. And yeah, just subscribe.